Today we are going to be comparing the very popular Kukirin M3 against the G2 Pro. Both of these scooters I have reviewed. Both of them reviews are going to be linked below, but I've been asked countless times already, which is better, the G2 Pro or the M3. These scooters can be different in many ways, so I'm going to break every single thing down in this video. So let's go. The G2 Pro weighs 26 kilograms compared to the Kukirin M3 that actually weighs 22. This is partially due because the G2 Pro has of course front and rear suspension, which has obviously the swing arms there, plus it also comes with a seat. The climbing ability on the G2 Pro is 20 degrees, whereas the climbing ability on the M3 is actually 24. Max load on both scooters is the same, which is at 120 kilograms. Max range that you get on the G2 Pro is 55 kilometers, whereas on the M3 it is 40 kilometers. Max speed on the G2 Pro is 45 kilometers an hour, whereas the max speed on the M3 is actually 40 kilometers an hour. But you can actually change this on the M3 through its app, which I'll talk about a bit later on in the video. Now the brakes on both scooters are actually quite different. On the G2 Pro, you get front and rear mechanical disc braking, which is basically, you know, it's standard. But they are quite poor, I think, in quality. So for that reason, they are going to require constant maintenance because they are similar to the M4 Pros, which is the previous scooter before the G2 Pro came along. Whereas the M3 has a front drum brake and it also has electronic braking that comes from the rear motor on that. Now, like I mentioned, the suspension on the G2 Pro, if you look at that review, it is quite firm. There's not a lot of give, there's not a lot of travel, and it is poor at best. Another thing that actually bothered me about the G2 Pro was the deck space is actually quite small and quite narrow. From pictures on websites, it looks quite large and quite comfortable, but in reality, the dimensions, if you check on their website, it is quite small. If you have big feet, you're going to struggle. And the reason for this is because I think the G2 Pro is of course more of a seated electric scooter, which is optional. So you wouldn't have a problem with being comfortable if you are seated. But if you are standing for long journeys, it is going to be a pain. Whereas on the M3, it is actually nice and long and it is a bit more wide. So it is definitely more comfortable for shifting your feet around for going long distances. So you definitely have to keep that in mind. The torque on the G2 Pro is actually 23 Newton meters, whereas the torque that comes from the M3 is actually 29 Newton meters. And here's where things get even a little bit more strange. The battery that comes with the G2 Pro is a 48 volt 15 amp hour battery, whereas the battery that comes on the M3 is a 36 volt 13 amp hour. And you can already see from the M3's review that I done, I already mentioned that the torque from that motor, even though it is a lower spec technically, is much better. Because I think the G2 Pro is more of an outdated design and they have improved things on the M3. I'm also going to talk about the best feature that the M3 has in my opinion a little bit later on. Now, okay, one of my pet peeves is the tires on some electric scooters that I do review. On the G2 Pro, it has their 9" by 3", but in reality, when you actually measure the width of the tire that the G2 Pro comes with, it's not 3". It's around 2.75 inches. And the tire on that electric scooter are quite poor and quite soft. They are prone to punctures. They're the same tires that came with my M4 Pro, which was an absolute headache to change the puncture, very time consuming. The tires, however, that come on the M3 are 10" tires. The front tire is obviously a 10" pneumatic tire, which is really nice quality. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the M3 does actually have front suspension, which is better than the suspension that's actually on the G2 Pro. And the rear tire on the M3 is a 10" solid tire. Now you might be saying, solid tires, are they going to give problems down the road? Of course you will have to change it as time progresses, but in reality, because you have the front pneumatic tire, you also have suspension there, and they are indeed 10". That scooter was very comfortable. It was quiet when I was riding, really nice quality to see. Whereas the G2 Pro, even though it had the hybrid tires, the comfort was not all there and the stability was not there either on the G2 Pro. because the handlebars were too wide for that electric scooter and the steering was extremely loose. So when I was doing the top speed test, it just wasn't there and I didn't feel really safe on it. So you can see that from the video itself. Both electric scooters have similar lighting, which is really good. I think the G2 Pro maybe has a front better LED light that has 4 small LEDs within its own fitting, which is quite decent, and it does have a rear light as well, and the M3 is quite similar, so you can't really compare. The lighting is quite good on both of them, to be honest. Now, not to mention that the M3 comes with 2 NFC keys and it has its own app, and I've been asked countless times what is the name of the app that the M3 comes with. It is indeed called the Green Drive app, and on this app, of course, you can see, you know, information, but you can also change things around yourself through the app if you wanted to. You can also disable. Another question is, if you lose your NFC keys that belong to the M3 model, what do you do? Well, in reality, always have one spare key at home. But if you're somebody who is really worried about doing that, you can, if you wanted, disable the NFC capabilities through the app and just put the keys to one side. So you just turn on the scooter as normal. Again, this is shown in the video. Now, the Green Drive app also, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can actually increase the speed on the M3 to 50 kilometers an hour. But again, that will deplete the battery. I think it's best to keep it at the stock speed of 40 kilometers an hour. But that app is really good. Now, another huge difference between these scooters is something that I fell in love with the M3. IP ratings. Yep, a lot of scooters out there are just standard IP54, but on the M3, it is actually IPX7 rated. Now, these scooters have been used by actual rental companies. You can see them on your streets. There's a few companies in my country that actually use the design, basically the whole frame, everything is identical pretty much due to its IPX7 waterproof rating. I do show a few more details about this in the actual review itself, but that is probably, in my opinion, the best selling point, because where I live, it does rain quite a lot, so we need a scooter that can withstand the weather. G2 Pro is of course just standard IP54, so I will definitely be wary about that. If you live in a rainy country, it's something to keep in mind. Another difference between both of these electric scooters is the price. G2 Pro can come in at around €559, whereas the M3 can come in at €469, and if I have any discount codes, I will link them below for both electric scooters. But in my opinion, is the G2 Pro suitable for everybody? No. In my opinion, it lacks in so many areas. It's only suitable for seated riding, to be completely honest, if you must need a seat. The climbing ability is poor. The tires are poor. The brakes are poor. The IP rating is poor. The deck space is small and uncomfortable. The M3, it has the IP rating. It has the NFC keys. It has really good tires. It has a really nice drum brake, decent speed, decent range. I don't have nothing to complain about with the M3. The G2 Pro also has been prone to a few issues like controller burnout and that type of thing. My friend Robbie, who has the eScoots channel, has fixed countless amounts of them. Of course, the M3 is a newer release scooter, so down the line, will it give issues? I don't know. But at this point in time, they seem pretty solid to me, and the frame is rock solid as well on the M3. And you can actually see that when Kukirin released the trailer, I guess you say, or the announcement of the M3, they were doing crazy things like submerging it in water, swimming pools, throwing it off balconies. Of course, I don't recommend this. But doing crazy things like that has increase the selling point from the M3. So if you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a like. Check out both reviews right now, and I'll talk to you in the next video.